Good afternoon. Welcome to News Plus here on Loveworld USA. I'm TGK Andre. Let's take a quick look at the top headline stories this afternoon. Trump says progress made in Putin summit, but no ceasefire deal yet. The Trump administration scales back DC police takeover, but imposes immigration order. RFK Jr. revives childhood vaccine safety task force after pressure from activists. A judge blocks federal sharing of Medicaid data with immigration officials. And Democrats criticize Pentagon over pause on $800 million software projects. And now to the news. President Donald Trump offered new insight Friday night into his high-stakes summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin, telling Fox News' Sean Hannity that while no ceasefire deal was reached, a lot of progress was made. Trump described the Alaska meeting as a success, rating it a 10 out of 10, and insisted Putin wants to see it done, though he declined to reveal the key sticking point that kept the leaders from announcing an agreement. The former president said the next phase will fall to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European allies, adding that he is open to attending a trilateral meeting with Putin and Zelensky if it helps finalize a peace deal. "If they'd like, I'll be at that meeting," Trump said, framing his role as setting the table rather than negotiating directly on Ukraine's behalf. Trump used the interview to highlight contrasts with the previous administration, arguing Russia only came to the table because it now respects America, and claiming the war in Ukraine never would have started if he had remained in office. He also repeated his long-standing criticism of mail-in voting, telling Hannity that Putin himself questioned the legitimacy of the 2020 U.S. election. While Trump painted the meeting as a breakthrough, no formal commitments were announced. The White House said further discussions are planned, but it remains unclear whether they will bring a ceasefire closer or simply extend a process that has so far left Ukraine's fate uncertain. Let's take a look.
I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Ratcliffe, thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job.
Let me set the stage for you here. For the first time in years, during the Biden administration, President Biden never met with Vladimir Putin. We had the leader of the United States of America and the leader of Russia come together. Where did they meet? Alaska. And for the viewers at home, if you didn't know, Alaska is less than 1,000 miles from Russia. Of course, the way that maps are broadcast, on the globe due to the Mercator projection, makes it seem like there's a west to east. When you consider the globe, again, being circular, you understand that Alaska is actually closer to Russia than it might be to the contiguous United States. Of course, Alaska was sold by Russia to the United States in the 1800s, so that was one of the strategic emphasis in why they chose to meet there. And of course, in this deal, we've heard President Putin, or reports have come out saying that President Putin wants Ukraine to surrender Donetsk and part of East Ukraine to Russia as one of their terms for ending the war, of course, in which President Zelensky of Ukraine has said that there will be no concession of land in talks of a ceasefire deal. So we have Trump in a situation where for the first time, he's finally brought Putin to America, who's been very difficult to get a hold of or talk with concretely, because as we've covered here on Loveworld USA, there have been different spats in which Trump has been a bit direct in his tone towards Putin. Of course, there was the whole issue with Zelensky when he came to the White House, which resulted in Zelensky storming out and Trump telling him not to come back. But now it seems like we're headed towards the right direction again, and it's good to see Trump again, who's been now nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, not wanting to be the necessary mediator, the one who's negotiating on Ukraine's behalf, but the man in the middle trying to find a compromise between the two, because at the end of the day, it has to come between the two, especially when it comes to countries that have such a storied history like Ukraine and Russia, where pride is definitely a thing that's on the table, the pride of your nation, not the pride of men. Let me clarify. It's important that the agreement comes between the two, and hopefully that agreement does come soon. The Trump administration has agreed to keep Washington, D.C. Police Chief Pamela Smith in place, pulling back from its sudden move to sideline her. But officials issued a new order requiring the department to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement. The decision followed hours of courtroom arguments on Friday, where a federal judge questioned the legality of Attorney General Pam Bondi's earlier directive that sought to install Drug Enforcement Administration Chief Terrence Cole as emergency head of the Metropolitan Police Department. While the court pressed for compromise, Bondi issued a fresh memo insisting that D.C. police must share information with federal agencies, overriding the city's sanctuary protections. Mayor Muriel Bowser's office said it was reviewing how to comply while still upholding local laws, and acknowledged the week of tension had fueled waves of anxiety among residents. Immigration advocates warned that the new federal mandate could erode trust between immigrant communities and law enforcement, making people afraid to call police even in emergencies. The episode marks one of the most significant assertions of federal power over the Capitol in modern times. Although D.C. has faced challenges with crime and homelessness, its homicide rate is lower than several other large U.S. cities. Activists gathered outside police headquarters Friday, chanting, "Protect Home Rule," as federal patrols and National Guard deployments across the city deepened the sense of confrontation over who ultimately governs the nation's capital. Watch this.
D.C. has won back some control of its police department, but just some, as Mayor Muriel Bowser acknowledged late today.
I am encouraged by the judge's remarks and the federal government making the changes that were suggested.
One day after the Trump administration attempted to box out D.C.'s police chief and temporarily replace her with Trump political appointee Terry Cole, the head of the DEA, the D.C. government sued, a judge intervened, and the administration agreed to pull back. D.C. Councilmember Charles Allen says people he represents feel safer with the local police in charge, not the administration or the hundreds of federal agents now manning posts on D.C. streets.
It's dangerous because they're not trained here, they're not accountable here. Our local police department, they are trained locally. They know how to do community policing. We have accountability for that. That's who we trust.
This is another strong example of Trump's modus operandi for his second term. What we're seeing here, folks, and you have to understand this, is we're seeing a president who is clearly not satisfied with the state of the country, and he's also not satisfied with how the country is responding to the state of the country. So imagine a parent that's allowed their children to sleep in a bit too much, and sometimes they might say get up and they'll come and they'll shake them, but they're not responding well. And then all of a sudden, the next parent comes in and they're not even trying to shake them. They just dump ice cold water straight on them in the morning. Get up right now. That is, to me, a great analogy of what Trump is doing to the nation. Of course, he's willing to pull back when compliance is met, as we've seen. He wanted to institute the head of the DA, Terrence Cole, but when the D.C. police force now agreed to start sharing information and pull back on their sanctuary city regulations, we saw them step back. So right now there's a lot of shock value. I mean, when Trump sent troops, the National Guard, to California, when Trump, requested or, threatened to cut funding from colleges, from states that weren't complying with Title IX, that weren't complying with anti-Semitic orders that he put in place, or DI orders that he put in place, we're seeing him dumping the ice cold water on these institutions, saying, hey, this country is clearly in a state that needs to be fixed. Nobody's doing anything to fix it. The gentle way was tried. I mean, of course, nobody wants crime, but it's not being tackled hard enough. So under the Biden administration, and even Trump's first administration to an extent, there was a gentle method that was used. Now we're going to come in the hard way. We're going to pour the ice water. It's not going to be a light tap on your shoulder. We're going to wake this country up and get it back to where it needs to be. So when you see articles and news stories like this, you have to understand that Trump is trying to shock the nation on purpose by showing it things that it's not used to. We will keep you updated on how this policy goes. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services announced Friday it is reviving a long-defunct task force on childhood vaccine safety, a move championed by anti-vaccine activists and critics of the nation's immunization policies. In a statement, the HHS said the Task Force on Safer Childhood Vaccines, originally created in 1986 but dissolved in 1998, will once again review vaccine oversight and recommend ways to reduce adverse reactions. The agency said its mission is to ensure vaccines given to American children are safer, higher quality, and more effectively monitored. Members from the National Institutes of Health, the Food and Drug Administration, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will sit on the panel. The revival follows pressure from Children's Health Defense, an organization founded by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and long criticized for spreading vaccine misinformation. The group had funded a lawsuit earlier this year against the HHS for failing to reinstate the task force. Its CEO, Mary Holland, celebrated the news, writing that it took nearly 50 years for the department to comply with the law. Since taking office, Kennedy has overhauled federal vaccine policy in ways that have alarmed many public health experts. He dismissed the CDC's panel of independent vaccine advisors and replaced them with members who have voiced skepticism of immunizations, including COVID-19 shots. In May, he also pulled back the CDC's recommendation for COVID vaccines in pregnant women and healthy children. The newly reinstated task force signals a further step in reshaping federal vaccine guidance along the lines of Kennedy's long-standing criticisms. Let's take a look.
A lawsuit from an anti-vaccine advocacy group formerly led by HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The task force will make recommendations on vaccine development, distribution, and monitoring. The director of the National Institutes of Health will lead that group. Other members include the CDC director and commissioner of the FDA. HHS says the task force will submit its first report to Congress within 2 years.
If you take a look at the vaccine schedule from the 1970s, in fact, even the 1980s, to the vaccine schedule for children now, you will notice that the number of vaccines required for children between the ages of 0 to 18 has more than quadrupled. In fact, I believe it's a 6-time increase, if I recall correctly. And if you take a look at the state of children in the country today, we can't say that the children are getting healthier. In fact, it's actually been reported again by the National Institute of Health that there are more chronic diseases affecting Americans now more than ever, the number having multiplied since the 60s when the study's information was first collated. So the vaccines have increased, but then the number of children facing illnesses, facing different ailments, has also increased as well. And of course, as anybody who's taken a survey or conducted a survey would know, correlation does not equal causation, but it does equal cause for suspicion. So it's good to see Robert F. Kennedy doing well on his promise to again investigate, at the very least, what is going on with these vaccines. Because as the man of God has said, the vaccines don't work. I mean, putting in a stepped on or, a watered down version of the illness into somebody to get the antibodies to fight it, it sounds well on paper, but it's not backed by true science. It's not backed by, in fact, even natural process. It's like taking what doesn't kill you makes you stronger and making it a national health policy. It sounds nice. It sounds like it works. And of course, if you go to C-Flix and look at the history of vaccines, a documentary that was published by the Loveworld ministry, you'll find way more information on this, including the origin of vaccines and why they came to this school of thought. But as we've seen, the numbers show that as the vaccine schedule increased, so did the number of sick children. But again, correlation does not equal causation, but it does equal cause for suspicion. A federal judge has ordered the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to stop providing immigration authorities with the personal information of millions of Medicaid employees and enrollees in 20 states. The temporary order follows a lawsuit filed by those states after it was revealed that the agency had granted the Department of Homeland Security daily access to home addresses, social security numbers, and other personal details of all 79 million Medicaid recipients. The data sharing arrangement, initiated in June and expanded in July, was not publicly announced. Judge Vince Chabria of California said the policy risks disrupting Medicaid's role in providing coverage for vulnerable residents. The order will remain in effect until the HHS offers a clear jurisdiction and justification for the program. The HHS maintains that its agreement with the DHS is legal. Federal law bars most immigrants without legal status from enrolling in Medicaid, but requires states to provide emergency Medicaid for life-saving care. Critics warn the data-sharing policy could discourage people from seeking emergency medical help for themselves or their children. Washington State Attorney General Nick Brown said medical care should be accessible without fear of what the federal government may do with that information. Watch this.
Means is that at least for the next 14 days, the federal government, or really Health and Human Services and Medicaid specifically, is blocked from sharing the information.
Prisoner immigration attorney George Rios breaking down the decision comes after a 20-state lawsuit and stipulates that the reasoning behind the data release is flawed.
They just decided, you know what, we're going to end this. And it's been long-standing policy, well over 10 years, where it's been official policy that this kind of information was not going to be shared between agencies.
Rios says the planned release has been creating fear for millions of non-citizens in the state receiving Medicaid benefits. The Trump administration says that they are not eligible for them.
There's people who altogether will stop going to the doctor, just because they are afraid. There's people who will no longer try to unenroll from these services that they already qualify for.
Valley GOP State Assembly member David Tongipa says it's just another example of a judge using their power trying to stop the Trump administration's agenda.
It's a ruling that tells pretty much the entire executive that they don't have the right, Homeland Security, a lot of these groups, to accessing that information.
He believes this case should be decided at the highest level.
It should go to the Supreme Court to settle. Where are the powers enumerated to the executive or to potentially a district judge?
This is one of those situations where you have to be careful, I'd say, because of course you do want people to have access to health care, but at the same time, the government, who again is funding the health care, does have a right to the information of the health of the people whose health they're funding. To put it in layman's terms, it's almost the case of if I wanted to pay for somebody to go to college, I wanted to sponsor somebody to do something, and I'm asking who the person is, and I can't have their information. I can't know anything about them because I might not like the person, or I might have something against the person. And the question then is, so if that's the case, should I just withdraw my funding if I can't get the information? Because when you're paying for something for somebody, and again, it's the taxpayers who are paying through the federal government, you definitely have a right to the person's information. That's part of how it goes. I mean, if anything were to happen to them and they needed more care, because again, the hospitals have all this information, but the hospitals are the ones who are taking care of them, but they're not the ones who are paying for them to be taken care of. So it's almost like they're telling the federal government, hey, just give us your money and leave us alone. You know, whatever happens, even if this person is a wanted criminal in their own country, even if this person has this, and this going on, you're still going to fund it. So whether you're funding criminals, whether you're funding innocent people, and I do want to clarify, most of them are innocent people, but you still do have some bad apples. You know, it's none of your discretion. And that's where the issue that the federal government is having trouble reconciling. And hopefully in the next few months, there will be a strong reconciliation because, of course, people do deserve access to health care, and nobody should be scared of going to the hospital, especially when it's needed. We will take a break, and when we return, more stories will follow. Don't go anywhere.
This month is a month of conscious truth. It's not enough to know the truth in a generic sense. You need the consciousness of truth. If you go to 3 John, verse 3, for I rejoice greatly when the brethren came and testified of the truth that is in thee, even as thou walkest in the truth. Remarkable. Then it goes in the next verse, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. So to live in the truth is to live in his word. To walk in the truth is to walk in the word. So you have to know the word. You got to study the word. You have to be open to the ministry of the Holy Spirit in your life. Remember, Jesus said, he is the Spirit of truth, sent by God to guide you into all truth. The Holy Spirit will show you the truth about life. He'll show you the truth about God, about the kingdom of God. Meditation helps you have the consciousness of truth. So if you're going to live the conscious truth, it means you must meditate on the word. For example, nobody is perfect. Where does that come from? From Satan. But as a Christian, you may think you're humble when you're saying that. No, you're not telling the truth, because what you just said is inconsistent with God's truth. So when you say nobody's perfect, then you've declared God to be a liar. Because God said, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. He said so. He demands it of you. So when you say nobody is, you're saying nobody can be. You're saying God deceived you by telling you to be perfect when he knew you couldn't be. So where did you get the term nobody's perfect? It's not in the Bible, but it's easy to say it. So we can say, you know, God is perfect, but man has flaws. What do you mean man has flaws? Were you told to be a man? He told you that when you're carnally minded, you will live the life of a man. But he told you as he is, so are you in this world. So when they say such things, they're trying to make excuses actually for themselves. So if I say, you know, even pastors have flaws, that is witchcraft. Yes, sir. Next time you hear somebody talk like that, you're listening to a manipulator, because they're trying to lead you in a way that is not right. He sent the Holy Ghost and established the ministry gifts in the church of God for the perfecting of the saints. If that will not happen on earth, why then did he send such ministries? Learn to believe the truth from Jesus Christ. And that's what the ministry of the Holy Spirit in your life is about. He says he'll guide you into all truth. Christianity is the manifestation of the truth. You set your gaze on him, and the more you look at him, the more you're like him, the more the glory is revealed in your life. You will struggle with your flaws as long as you believe in them. If you believe in his righteousness, his rightness, you'll stand up and walk in it. Yes, sir. And you'll find your life glowing from glory to glory.
This excerpt is brought to you by Loveworld News.
Loveworld News, keeping the praise of God on your lips.
Welcome back. Democratic lawmakers are criticizing the Pentagon after reports that the Navy and Air Force are preparing to cancel nearly completed software projects more than $800 million. The move, first reported by Reuters, has raised concerns that work could be redirected to companies like Salesforce and Palantir, despite millions in taxpayer dollars already spent. Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia said the Defense Department has not provided a sufficient explanation for halting the contracts, calling the decisions suspect. If it can't show its homework, then this announcement, just days after Palantir CEO spoke of Mike Johnson's Wyoming donor retreat, reeks of corruption. Kaine said in a statement, House Armed Services Democrats echoed those concerns, warning of waste and potential favoritism. Trump administration officials have defended the decision, framing it as part of an effort to streamline defense contracting. The Pentagon has not publicly addressed the specifics of the cancellations. The pause comes as the administration touts the Department of Government Efficiency, a new agency that claims to have already canceled $14 billion in Defense Department contracts. But critics say the administration's own actions are undermining oversight. Representative Maggie Goodlander called the move an insult to taxpayers and service members, while Representative Jill Takuda warned against sweetheart deals for the well-connected. Other Democrats pointed to what they see as a broader pattern of waste at the Pentagon under Trump, citing costly parades and troop deployments that they argue do little to improve national security. Now, this is a story that I'd been waiting to get to. And it's not often that I would say that, you know, the leftist agenda has a point, but I'm going to present this fact to you because, of course, here, I'm only here to speak facts. The Pentagon, and again, this has nothing to do with whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or a libertarian, the Pentagon has failed 8 straight audits, 8 straight financial audits. If they fail another one this year, that will make it the 9th straight year. If you fail an IRS audit, and I mean you at home, they will come to you and they will start seizing your property. But for 8 straight years, the Pentagon has not been able to explain, again, to the United States taxpayers who fund all of their fiscal policy, their financial decisions, because they've lost money every single year for the past 8 years straight. I mean, again, I could spend all of my time today just speaking about the Pentagon failing 8 straight audits. I mean, again, the IRS got Al Capone not on racketeering, not on a RICO charge. They got him on tax evasion. You know, there's something that the Joker from the DC animated universe said that, you know, that he can play with crime, but you can't play with the IRS. It's something that's so well known. So there's definitely a right for these politicians, again, from the Senate committee to be questioning why they would cancel an $800 million contract when it's so close to completion. And I hope that they hammer in on this point again, because this is something that I want you to leave with in your mind anytime you hear about the Pentagon and spending. 8 straight failed audits. Thank you to the Democrats for pressing on this issue. It's the people's money, and the people deserve to know where their money's going to, and if that contract isn't going to be completed, why. And now we'll take a look at some of the stories that made the headlines this week. The U.S. Supreme Court will this fall decide whether to hear a case seeking to overturn Obergefell v. Hodges, the 2015 decision that legalized same-sex marriage nationwide. The petition was filed by Kim Davis, a former Kentucky county clerk who in 2015 served 6 days in jail for refusing to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples on religious grounds. Davis is appealing a jury order requiring her to pay $100,000 in damages plus $250,000 in attorney's fees to plaintiffs. She argues her First Amendment right to free exercise of religion protects her from liability, calling Obergefell egregiously wrong and urging the court to reverse it. Lower courts have rejected her claims, ruling that the First Amendment cannot shield state officials from legal responsibility for official actions. Her case comes as at least 9 states this year have introduced measures urging the court to reverse Obergefell. The Southern Baptist Convention has also identified overturning the decision as a priority. Polling shows national support for same-sex marriage at about 70%, but Republican support has dropped to 41% since 2020. If the court agrees to hear the case, arguments could occur in spring 2026, with a decision by June. The 2022 Respect for Marriage Act would require recognition of existing same-sex marriages if Obergefell were overturned. Since the 2015 ruling, an estimated 823,000 same-sex couples have married in the United States. Let's take a look.
Some of the sentiment in the country has started to shift a little bit, softened rather, against same-sex marriage. There's been a lot of talk about whether the justices will get a chance to reconsider the case. And as you said there, they are getting that opportunity next month. We've learned that Kim Davis, she's that Kentucky clerk from back in 2015 that was at the center of international controversy when she refused to issue marriage licenses to a gay couple in Kentucky in defiance of the Supreme Court. She spent 6 days in jail. She lost a defamation suit. She had to pay $100,000 in damages, $260,000 in legal fees. That's what she's appealing to the Supreme Court.
So again, with this Obergefell v. Hodges decision, we have to understand that when this came out in 2015, this was a landmark ruling. And when I say landmark, I said this, of course, most Supreme Court rulings go down in history. This will go down as one of the most controversial and directly impacting American society decisions ever passed by the Supreme Court. So now in Kim Davis's situation, we have a case where she's claiming that her religious expression, again, which is a First Amendment protected act, could be covered while she was performing her duties as a state official. Because, of course, as a state official, you have a duty to the people that you're serving. But of course, as the case does make its way back to the Supreme Court, the same Supreme Court who in 2015 did vote to did vote on Obergefell. We will keep you updated here on Loveworld USA how it goes. A federal judge has denied the Trump administration's effort to unseal grand jury transcripts from the Ghislaine Maxwell case, calling the Justice Department's stated justification demonstrably false. Maxwell is serving a 20-year sentence for sex trafficking connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Judge Paul Engelmeyer ruled the transcripts contain no new names of individuals accused of sexual contact with minors, no details on Epstein's death, and no additional information on their criminal methods. He suggested the motion may have been intended for political diversion rather than public transparency. The ruling is the second rejection of such a request, with a third judge still weighing a related motion tied to a 2019 Epstein probe. The administration's push followed criticism from some supporters after it declined to release more Epstein-related records, despite prior statements suggesting it would. According to DOJ records, federal authorities hold over 300 gigabytes of data from the Epstein investigation, including computers, storage drives, CDs, photographs, travel logs, and property blueprints. Many materials reportedly contain explicit images of minors, restricting public release under federal law. President Donald Trump on Tuesday escalated criticism of Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, urging an immediate interest rate cut and threatening to allow a lawsuit over the central bank's $3.1 billion building renovation to proceed. In posts on Truth Social, Trump accused Powell, who he appointed in 2017, of mismanaging both monetary policy and the renovation of the Mariner S. Eccles Federal Reserve Building and the adjacent FRB East Building in Washington, D.C. Trump claimed the project should have cost no more than $50 million and called Powell grossly incompetent. The Fed has said the work, approved in 2021 by the National Capital Planning Commission, involves necessary structural upgrades. Trump has repeatedly pressed for rate cuts as inflation holds at 2.7% in July, criticizing the Fed's decision to keep its benchmark range at 4.25 to 4.5%. He also urged the Fed's Board of Governors to bypass Powell if he resists cuts before the Federal Open Market Committee's next meeting on September 17th to the 18th. The remarks follow Representative Anna Paulina Luna from Florida referring Powell to the Justice Department earlier this month for alleged false statements about the Eccles building's amenities and condition. A Fed spokesperson declined comment. A longtime Democratic staffer on the House Intelligence Committee told the FBI that then-Representative Adam Schiff authorized the leak of classified information in 2017 to discredit President Donald Trump, according to newly released documents. The whistleblower, who worked for Democrats on the committee for more than a decade, said Schiff told staff in an all-hands meeting that the material would be used to indict Trump. The documents, first obtained by Just the News and later declassified by FBI Director Kash Patel, indicate the whistleblower called the action treasonous and illegal. The whistleblower also alleged that committee Democrats had a system for leaking information. That sensitive material, viewed by Schiff and Representative Eric Swalwell, was leaked almost verbatim within a day. The FBI interviewed the whistleblower multiple times, most recently in June 2023, but the Justice Department declined to investigate further, citing the Constitution's speech or debate clause. The whistleblower disputed that the protection applied. He also claimed he was dismissed from his role in 2017 for refusing to participate in leaks. Schiff, who was censured by the House in 2023 for promoting the Russia collusion narrative, was elected to the Senate in 2024. During Trump's presidency, Schiff frequently cited unverified allegations, including portions of the Steele dossier, during public proceedings. A federal appeals court has overturned a lower court ruling, allowing the Trump administration to move forward with plans to cut billions of dollars in foreign aid this year. In a 2-1 decision on Wednesday, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit ruled that nonprofit organizations challenging the cuts lacked legal standing to bring the case. The court did not address whether the administration's actions violated the Constitution, focusing instead on jurisdiction. Judges Karen Henderson and Gregory Katsas concluded that only the head of the Government Accountability Office is authorized to sue under the Impoundment Control Act. The lawsuit, filed after President Trump ordered a suspension of USAID grants that did not align with his priorities, had been one of the few early legal victories for nonprofits opposing the cuts. A U.S. District Court previously blocked the order, and both the Appeals Court and the Supreme Court had initially allowed that block to remain in place. In her dissent, Judge Florence Pan warned that the ruling enabled the executive branch to bypass Congress's spending authority, calling it a threat to the separation of powers. She argued that the court's decision facilitates the executive's unlawful behavior and undermines constitutional checks and balances. And now, let's take a look at the weather update. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the headlines. Trump says no progress, or progress made in Putin summit, but no ceasefire deal yet. The Trump administration scales back DC police takeover, but imposes immigration order. RFK Jr. revives childhood vaccine safety task force after pressure from activists. A judge blocks federal sharing of Medicaid data with immigration officials. And Democrats criticize Pentagon over pause on $800 million software projects. And that's News Plus for today. Remember to join us at the same time tomorrow for more. I'm TGK Andre. Good day, and God bless you.